Hey everyone, welcome to the MSP Show here on Blog Talk Radio. My name is Stuart Crawford and welcome to another great episode. This show, we spotlight IT service companies that are doing some remarkable things, and today I have a majority of my team that I work with from Forthright Technology Partners, normally located in Hollywood, Florida area, Fort Lauderdale, but they're still working from home when I'm in my office. So welcome to Andrew Medina, Frank Merino, and Kristin Graham, and we'll wait for Steve to join us. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to the show today. Andrew, I'm going to kickstart you. Tell, since you're the CEO of the company, give us the lowdown on Forthright, everything you guys stand for, and how you got started.
All right. So I wasn't expecting this type of format, but sure. So company was started in 1992, and it was sort of started just out of nothing serious. And 28 years later, we've had up to 50 people working in the organization, 2 offices in South Florida and North Carolina, and it's provided a great living for a lot of people, and a lot of families depend on Forthright. So it's evolved very, very incredibly as somebody standing on the sidelines watching this thing grow. It's been a very incredible privilege to be able to see something that we started on a whim develop into something so serious. So I think that one of the largest factors of our success, and I think an episode I had with Frank yesterday around 6 or 7 o'clock when we were talking, and we were just commiserating over what had gone down that Memorial Day weekend. And he talked about how a client kept, calling him up and talking to him, although he was on scheduled PTO. And the fact that he kept taking the calls, and at a certain point it got personal, the conversation with the client. And, Frank was telling him, I try to disconnect, but I can't. I take these calls. And the client said, Frank, that's what makes you guys so special, is the fact that we're able to connect with you guys at any point that we absolutely need you. Because what we would see from other companies is the fact that, hey, it's beyond a certain point in time, we're not going to connect until the next business day or something of that nature. And the ability to be able to connect with us, with our staff at such a impromptu type of moment, and to talk about things that may or may not be things related to the engagement, but in our expertise, in our wheelhouse, is really what differentiates us, and what we keep hearing from our clients over and over again. Some of our clients have been with the firm for over 20 years, and it's something that you continuously see that it's a recurring theme. Why do they choose Forthright? Is because they're able to connect at a certain level way better than they're able to do with our competitors. So it's not our ability to scale this thing out to every single organization in our area. It's just that those that we can connect with, the ones that we can touch, get a much, much better experience than what they were used to with our competitors. And I think in a nutshell, it's that relationship that makes Forthright such an appealing type of choice for the customers that engage with us.
And I'd like to welcome Steve to the program. He just joined us after his little bit of a bad weather coming through. Welcome to the MSP Show today, Steve.
Right? I lost my internet there for a little bit.
The joys of, I see, I'm in my office here, but I'm like in Highlands County, a couple hours north of you guys. I see you're all still working from home in South Florida. It's all the joys of working from home. So we just got started, and Andrew was giving the history of Forthright. Frank, anything that you want to add to what Andrew was saying?
I know why I'm at Forthright. It has to do with I've been doing this for I've been with Forthright now for 16 years, and there's something about a genuine group of folks that we have. In IT, we're commonly you're commonly thrown a lot of jargon and acronyms. I like to call it alphabet soup. And I think that there's just something real about the people that are here and how we operate. there's a certain level of genuality within, how we respond to customers and things like that. Sometimes it could be a little abrupt or forceful, but I think there's something about that makes it really special. I know that I've worked with other providers. I've actually been an owner of another provider group, and there's something special about these group of guys that the keys is here. I don't know how to explain other than that they always have your best interest, and that sometimes not is in the best interest of Forthright. I could say that pretty emphatically.
So Andrew talked about competitors. I'd love to hear again, and feel free, anybody could jump into this question. There's a ton of IT service providers out there, from the smallest to the largest. What do you feel makes the difference in, over your competitors? Why people choose Forthright, say, instead of, say, something else that offers services?
So I think that, Stuart, obviously, Forthright is good at what it does. We wouldn't be in business for over 27 years if we were not capable or competent in what we do. Our competitors are competent in what they do. They wouldn't be in business if they weren't, or they'd be in business for a very short amount of time if they weren't. So when you ask about what the secret sauce is, it cannot be the fact that we're competent. That's not the secret sauce. That's the standard around all of the competition, because otherwise they wouldn't be in business. So then the real question is what is that different aspect? If we're all competent in what we do, then why is it that some companies choose Forthright over the others? Because it's not because of price. I can tell you right off the bat, we're definitely not the least expensive. And if we talk to current customers of the firm and we were to ask them why you chose Forthright, predominantly it would come back and say, listen, it was our ability to connect with the individuals, right? The competencies were there, obviously, but it was more than just the competency. It was our ability to connect, our ability to be able to find a firm who is interested above and beyond what the contract says they need to do. It's finding a firm that has our interests at heart and can tell us as it is and saying, hey, listen, this is not part of our contract, but let me just tell you something that you're doing wrong because of the fact that it's going to influence you in a negative way. And it's our ability to interact with that ability with the principles and whatnot that I think brings a difference to the equation, and that customers differentiate us based on that. Steve?
Yeah, I think it goes a step farther. The way we do that, and maybe it was intentional, it just worked out by the ownership and all the people who've been here for so long. It comes down to culture. I think that the culture that we push down to all of our resources are that you need to ask questions. You need to understand why. You need to understand the desired outcome from the customer, and then make sure that what we're doing not only is aligned with that, but even if it's not aligned with what's in our best interest, if it's in their best interest, you need to really heavily consider that. And if you're doing something that's not in the best interest of the customer, you need to call it out, whether it's direct with the customer or internally. In other words, some organizations, it's, listen, I need you to follow exactly what we tell you to do. I don't want to hear your opinion. I don't want to hear anything about what you want to do. This is what, just go do it. I think our culture here is ask the questions. I still may tell you to do it, and then I need you to do it. However, that open communication where you don't have to worry about who you're talking to in the organization from a hierarchy perspective, and it doesn't matter whether there's an opinion out there, we welcome that competitive conversation to say, look, I know we talked about doing it this way, but I have a better idea, or I have a concern that I want to voice. There's no repercussions for that. And as a matter of fact, that's something that's fostered, is make sure that you communicate what you're thinking, what your concerns are. And then that goes all the way out to the clients. You don't have a situation where we go into a client meeting and I tell Alan, listen, Alan, or Hazel, I want you to keep your mouth shut and don't say anything about this. We may talk about what the focus is of that conversation, but there's no muzzles put on the individuals. They're all talented individuals. They understand what we're trying to do, and they're there because of their expertise. We want them to be vocal about that. Some customers find that is off-putting because it makes people uncomfortable. But as soon as you've worked with us for a little bit, you quickly realize that, hey, you know what? They may tell me things I don't want to hear, and it may be at an inconvenient time. But what I can do is trust what they're telling me. And now my job and my company's success is based on what these guys are going to do. And when things get rough, and they do in IT, right? Projects run into problems. I want these guys behind my back because they're going to be very direct with me, and they're not going to just try to PCR or sell me something else. They're going to try to drive the desired outcome. I think there's that culture. And then the other one is there is a certain amount of accountability where our guys are incredibly responsive. And I know other companies can be responsive too, but when it's outside of your scope and you're doing a project and the company runs into a problem, and I actually have quotes from some of our customers and reference letters that talk about this. When IT projects go south and you run into a problem, the partner you want is not the one that says, hey, that's not my issue. Good luck. Call me when you've gotten past it. We understand that that's in our way of being successful also. And therefore, if I can help you out of a jam or guide you, even though it's not my responsibility, we're going to want to do that and keep things moving forward. And we don't just dip out, even if it's 3 o'clock in the morning. And there's countless, stories like that across all of our staff where our guys just, it would be expected that they would go home. It would be expected that they would tap out, and they don't because they care. And I think that's something different too. And it's hard for someone who's never met us to get that. But as they talk to our references, or they even do a single project with us, it becomes pretty apparent the commitment level.
I think the word really comes down to accountability, Steve. That's just something that each of us embody in whether or not that's something that you openly make a commitment to a customer, or commitments are really interesting around Forthright. Just if you say it, it's going to happen. It's like a law. And but I think that's something that's there. And you're right. If something was supposed to work, and in IT we like to use words like should, it could, these ambiguity terms, so that we can get out of it. I think that Forthright takes a different approach to those things, and there's, I wouldn't say definitives, but they're matched with accountability and as to how to accomplish those things. Sometimes again to our detriment, but the truth of the matter is that I think long term it's something that customers can see. I mean, I remember a project many moons ago that I think the effective billing rate was sub $5. I mean, that's not, you don't sustain a business that way, but that was something to show. This is an example of the kind of commitment we said was something was going to happen, and we did it. And that's how it works. And I think it gets people, builds definitely loyalty, no doubt about it.
I think the key also is the consistency in delivering that, because any company can be committed at certain periods of time. I think that what is unique is that this is a very consistent pattern that you see across the board of every single resource, and so much so that we get noticed and recognized by our clients without us asking for the reference. I would tell you that almost on a monthly basis, we receive an email from some clients saying, hey, I just wanted to let you know that this person did this, and it was so above and beyond what we expected, and we just wanted to tell you thank you and wanted to recognize this person. And it's not because I asked them, hey, can you write me a reference letter? It's because they felt compelled, because it was just something that they're not used to. And I think we do a really good job across the organization of doing that on a regular basis, because it's just our normal operating process versus, I think every company tries to do this, and they can from time to time. The question is, can you be consistent? And I'm talking out loud, I guess that comes down to the experience of working with Forthright versus any other vendor. From a consumer or customer perspective, what is your expectation? And then when you're done with a project, whether it was smooth or not, you look back, what would have you changed? A lot of times the relationship and some of the disconnects in alignment between two different businesses become very apparent in these projects, right? Especially as your two staff are working side by side or collaborating. we really try to integrate better and act as if we're working for that company. And I think it just becomes evident.
So you guys have a little bit of a different business model compared to, some of the other managed service providers that you would find around South Florida. A little more upscale, mid-market, enterprise. How's that? How's that proven to be is that a successful formula for you? And what are some of the challenges you see when you're working with, those larger type of clientele versus, say, a 30-person law firm, in Fort Lauderdale?
Define success.
So, Stuart, we go across the gambit. We have customers that are very, very large, and we got customers that are small. I think our smallest is maybe 10 users,
okay.
And our largest is in the thousands. I think what we've realized over time is that there is a sweet spot, and that sweet spot we have found out to be. At first, we were known as the large whale hunters. We would go after very, very large type of deals with our professional services team. And we were very successful at that, but it's a very long-term type of sale, talking 2 to 5 years in terms of the sales cycle. So it's a very long sales cycle, and it's very it's very fraught with turnover danger. So that if you've made great relationships at the C-level suite, and the C-level suite is changed by the board of directors, and a new CEO comes in, and now it's all new different players, which they don't know who you are, and you got to start from scratch. What we found out is, as we brought that sweet spot to a smaller 250 users and up, and around that size, is that you can have a very long-lasting consistency at the C-level suite, because usually it's the owners that are there, but that you can also have conversations with them much, much faster than going up the ranks of a very large organization. So we found that that actually works very well for us. And I'm going to let my business partners talk more of the operational side of things as it relates to those different types of size of companies. But from a market perspective, those are the things that we found work really well for us.
As I think about so the market, we've been trying to work on how we define that. We used to go with mid-market as a general term. People define those differently and whatnot. So we started to use SME, or small medium enterprises, because there is a certain, I don't want to say maturity, that an organization needs to have for this to be successful, but it really boils down to that. It goes beyond smart people, as Andrew and Steve both alluded to. And so we've been working heavily on the concept of, co-managed IT, where you have, internal IT for that customer. And then you also have an external body like Forthright to do a lot of the heavy lifting, the advanced stuff, the general day-to-day, and really set a bar for, what IT should be looking like for an organization to be experiencing. And that word experience is not something that's lost upon us, and we focus heavily on that, and the end user experience probably more so than anything else. So that's something that we constantly look forward to. So the SME market is something that is they can have qualified people, they can have smart techs, they can have all-in-one, jack of alls, those kind of things. They can have masters and whatever. The difference is that they're all about technology, and I call it the boys and toy syndrome, where people get obsessed with the tools and whatever. But there doesn't seem to be a thought process for how to deliver something to the end user. And I think that's because in IT, typically that's not a focal point for us. Forthright kind of puts, one of our pillars is user experience. And so you still got to have the boys and toy stuff. You got to have the metal, the infrastructure and all that jazz, the cloudness, monitoring tools and security. We can sit here and drown you with jargon some more, but ultimately it boils down to the end user. And there's a general appreciation for that user. They're the ones that are getting the work done, right? And so with that focus, customers of this size and maturity actually they really respect that quite a bit. It may take a little education to understand why they would want to care about an end user, especially some of our larger customers that are, have like contact centers and things like that. People are kind of looked at as tools that are easily replaced and whatnot. And to a certain degree, I'm sure that is there are markets that have that. But those that are very successful, even in those high turnover type markets, they have found that lowering that turnover and technology being a contributing factor there, really changes the game. So when you're comparing us to another organization or the market that we go through, I would say that focal point on the end user and why the technology matters to that end user aligns itself to this market. I don't know, at least we haven't seen, I should say, some of the smaller ones, they just want stuff to work. Like that's the definition of success for a lot of them. As we've moved up, the size of the organization, they understand, and this is where I get that maturity model. They understand the concept of the end user and the value that a single user brings, or a department, or those kind of things. And at that point in time, that's when having IT aligned with that thought process really showcases that. Now, as you go even further up that chain, you start realizing that organizations are looking at that at user experience much more across their organization, and putting teams together for that, and want IT to align with that because technology is so enabling. But as Andrew said, that we got to cap it at some point, just because it's difficult to deliver or it's difficult to achieve those things in short order, and that's a business decision. So there you go. That's a me for me.
Steve, anything you want to add to that?
I think going back to that point around end user centric, and while we definitely focus on application delivery and their performance, something that we've been doing the last year and a half, and it's become a big focus for our future, is that concept of client-centric or end-user-centric. And what that means is, look, conventional MSPs and other service providers, they're very focused on the tools they need to maximize their efficiency. The whole focus on what they do is how they operate, and they're going to deliver a service. And I get that model. I think the approach that we attempt to take in all of our aspects, and it's something we're constantly working on, it's not you don't get to an end state, but it's a way of thinking, is how do I put myself in the client's shoes and understand what that experience is like? So for example, historically, we've built a whole slew of tools, and we've leveraged and subscribed to tools that work in our industry that have all this integration into our PSA, and it helps us become technically a better MSP. And then we expose our customers to those portals. And there's 5 different portals, and they all look different. They all operate differently. Some are better than others, and it's not a good experience for them. And our efforts are to try to change that, so that way we can give them a much better experience, so much so that when you look at 2 tools, where historically it might be there's a certain technical aspect or an integration that's better for us but not better for the client, our industry goes that route. And even historically, we've gone that route because that's what MSPs have done. But I think because of our culture always focusing on being a fiduciary for the client, the minute you put yourself in their shoes, you start realizing, well, you know what? If you're giving them access to these tools so they have situational awareness and so they can leverage them too, then they have to be tools that were designed for the end user. And whatever extra work we might have to go through, that's our problem, not the client's problem. And if we can make that experience better, whether it's technical, whether it's with accounts payable, whether it's sales and marketing, that's kind of our drive. We actually started last year, actually as we entered the end of the year, we started talking about, hey, let's start proliferating this message throughout the entire organization. Obviously, that was right before the COVID thing happened, but that was a big push for us to make sure that we looked at everything that we're doing and every touch point with the customer, and how can we make sure that we're making that experience the best that it can be, because it's centric to that customer versus what we need from an operations standpoint. And so I think that drives a different experience as well. There's also a whole lot of transparency with our customers. We don't hide information. We don't hide our tools. We don't hide our opinions. And we end up giving a lot of free consulting out. And sometimes it's, hey, listen, while I have this solution for you, it's not the right thing. You shouldn't buy it. I mean, we'll sell it to you and it's here and I'll deliver the service. But the truth is you could do this instead and you'll reach your outcome. And all this other stuff that's great, you don't actually need it. And having the freedom for anybody in our organization to say that to a customer because they're being their fiduciary, it all just drives down to put yourself in the customer's shoes, pretend that you're them, and try to envision, listen, how can this whole interaction be better, regardless of what that interaction is.
Yeah, some great points there, guys. And Kristin, I know you're anything you want to add to that, because you're sitting there nice and like strong, silent type.
I'm taking tons of notes. From the more marketing side, I would agree with what everybody says, that it's I don't do anything the technical side of things, but the team is just one, like it's just, they're all really great. I mean, they're all really smart. They're good at what they do. And I think they, they stand behind what they say. So, you know what you're going to get, and, it's going to be done.
Nothing putting on the spot, right?
I know, exactly.
So, when we started getting together back, I think late January, early February, we went through a number of things, and one of the things that I admired about you, and I can't remember exactly what the date was, but I think it was Steve that said this COVID thing is gonna hit, and it's gonna hit hard, and everybody's gonna work from home. And I went, yeah, I don't know about that. And yeah, here we are at the end of May, and you guys are still in your homes, and I'm lucky enough I'm at the office, but it's because I'm getting some renovations done at my house right now. But you had the foresight, I almost said forthright, foresight to see into that and say that, hey, this is coming. So what did you guys do to prepare your clients for what happened here in mid to late March? I'll let whoever wants to pick that up.
I'll start. I mean, I think us working on the remote access desktop solution, which is a technology that was in place, and again, this was not in our best interest. What most customers wanted to do is buy a bunch of licenses, get consulting time, and we did help customers do that. But we also pitched hard, hey, there's a faster, better, quicker, and less expensive solution for your short-term problem, because you may have days, not months, to roll things out. And instead of you buying licenses now for a year or multi-year, you can go month to month. And we actually provided them with an option that gave them a lot of flexibility. So to give you an example, the call center call phone that I sent you the case study on, I saw you sent me a link this morning. I got a review, but they're an interesting use case because they were in a situation where they could have, and Centric was pushing them, hey, buy 1,500 additional licenses and sign a 3-year agreement. And the truth is that they have no idea what they're going to need in the next year or even the next couple of months. And that is a very expensive and costly proposition. And yes, we would gain financially now from doing that. But instead, what we told them is, listen, if you're going to send a certain amount of your population home, buy that group. I think they bought an extra 500 licenses. The rest, go month to month. And when you know what that ratio is going to be and you are more confident on how long that's going to be, you can always convert and get off the month to month. But let's think about this and not get caught up in the rush and in the moment. And then the other thing is, let's leverage these licenses and use this technology that nobody talks about. But the truth is, all these use cases, the 80% of the users that you never plan to work from home that already have a PC working, let me give you a solution where you can quickly send them home and start working. I think our biggest failing was that we couldn't get the message out fast enough to enough customers, because honestly, everybody that I spoke to, they either implemented that in some form, whether they did it internally or they used our service, and most actually already had infrastructure, so we were just giving them information on how to do it. Or they said, wow, I wish we would have talked sooner, because we just spent all this time buying a ton of laptops, dealing with the VPN and doing all the things that were hard and didn't provide the same outcome. So I don't know. I think that was, go ahead.
I think, if I understood your question correctly, Stuart, the way, the way we addressed this was, there was two paths, right? There was the take advantage of the moment. People were willing to buy, people were willing to spend. I think Steve articulated that well. Or there was, let's make sure that as being a Forthright customer, really a Forthright partner, let's make sure that we're looking out in your best interest. And so one of the things that we recognized is that as we, it's not about the sale. So much to our salespeople's chagrin, I'm sure. But it's not about that sale. You have to understand what can they accomplish once they buy the 10,000 VPN licenses or the extra 5,000 VDI licenses or whatever the case may be, right? Now you still need to find a way to to get those provisioned, and then I'm sure someone's going, oh, now we have all the services fees and then or some cloud spend and all those things sound great, and all I see are dollar signs. What we decided to do, and this is I think to what Steve was ending with, is that we recognize that it's not going to be that you have months to do this. If these were VDI or modernization projects, you would have months to do this, and you would plan it out as such, and therefore you'd have testing and you would have all those things. We recognized the problem was not just go spend money to fix this problem. You had a time factor that we had to consider here. And so we realized is that the easiest way to do that was not to go introduce a bunch of new stuff to the equation that really wasn't designed to work in that capacity or not work well in that capacity. And so we thought about, what we're really trying to do is create a situation where people need to function as though they were sitting in front of their desks, but they should not be in front of their desks. And so the solution was getting people to the desktop that they had sitting in their office. And, I think that was very contrarian to a lot of the other noise out there where people were talking about DAS and they were talking about VDI solutions and they were talking about VPN. We saw a lot of LogMeIn and all these other things. And I'm sure all of those had a place. What ours did was, again, in the SME market that we're talking about, you're not talking about 10 people. You're talking about hundreds or thousands of users. They all have workstations in their office. And we found a way for them to, the only change in their workflow was instead of you just seeing the login because you showed up at your computer, you're going to go to a new login page and it's going to put you right back to your computer. And that took a lot of thought. In some cases, to what Steve was saying, this is existing licensing that a lot of customers already own. So it wasn't like wasn't a dollar thing for us. It was just thinking about the problem in a way where it solved all the things. What was the outcome? That's what we solved for. It wasn't to solve for the customer presented, I need a VDI solution. No, that's not what you need. I mean, yes, you do, but that's for a different problem.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, and it drove two outcomes. The first outcome is it did drive the best end user experience, right? Because the users that were not used to working from home and understood how to work on their PC were not forced into a different environment. For them, it was exactly the same desktop they used every day. So nothing changed except the initial login process. So that was one thing, and that was obviously a big focus. As it was, working from home was going to be a big enough shift. If you had to now learn a bunch of new jumps and it's a different environment than what you had on your desktop, that just creates more chaos for a lot of the users. The second thing is, at the time, we envisioned people would be working from home. Nobody had an idea of how long that would be. Would it be 2 weeks? Would it be 2 months? Would it be 6 months? We still don't really know. Even though obviously the pressure's starting to go back, but you have a lot of big companies that are basically saying don't come back to the office for the rest of the year. So you don't want to make a huge financial commitment when you don't know how long the users have to work from home. And so we also were addressing the business requirements and their desired outcome to stay liquid, right? Don't spend a ton of capital. I'd rather do operating. And I want to spend as little money as possible to solve this problem, because if it is a permanent problem, well, then we can invest. But we have no idea what this is yet, and it's unprecedented. And therefore, how can I solve my problem with investing as little as possible? Because this is an unbudgeted type of thing. And I think thinking that way helped customers make better decisions. And I know we've saved many customers lots of money. And again, I wish we had a way of communicating with our customers faster, because obviously everybody was trying to do it at the same time, and they require demonstrations, and people want to understand how it all works and so on, and you can really only do that effectively with a handful of clients at a time.
So let's shift gears a bit more, and I want to bring Andrew in on this one because he's sitting nice and quiet for the last 10 minutes or so as Frank and Steve have been talking. Andrew, one of the things that you stressed to me when we first met was the importance of marketing, and you guys have been very creative on some of your marketing strategy. I've seen some of the videos on YouTube and different channels, and even as far as your top shelf tasting events when you did those before we got locked in. How important is it to your firm, or what role has marketing played in the growth of Forthright over the years?
Well, Stuart, that's a double-edged sword, because people in your profession, and when I say people in your profession, I mean marketers, have a very funny way to responding to questions of the financial, analytical type perspectives that owners look at. So that when I ask my director, somebody's mic is really a lot of feedback. When I asked my director of marketing at the time, I'm like, justify all of this money that we're spending. Obviously, as a financial person, I'm looking for specifics. I spent $100,000. Did I get $100,000 worth in benefits? And obviously, as you can attest to, the marketing response is always the fuzzy type of logic, math type of scenario, and how much is it worth that the brand's gotten out there, and look at the exposure that we've had. So from a perspective of truly just a financial analysis type of thing, marketing is a really hard thing to quantify, because you're not going to get, I spent $100,000, I got $100,000 worth of value. So one of the things that I've learned to do is learn to understand the value of brand presence, of brand exposure, of saying, hey, these events that we're doing are not bringing any immediate return to the firm, but if we look at it over a span of time, then we can start pinpointing the customers that attended to these things and became clients of the firm, or that they heard of us or saw our logos and things of that nature. And it starts gelling significantly more and more. From the history of the firm, that type of awareness really came in the last, I would say, 5 to 8 years, as we've been understanding more and more the value of the marketing spend, to the point that now we really understand. And it's funny, with the departure of our director of marketing and me taking a more active role and putting financial type of goals to it, saying I want X number of cold leads, I want X percentage of these leads to turn into warm leads, and I want a percentage of that to turn into net new customers of the firm. I begin to see how all of these things taken as individual campaigns, as individual things that we do, work as a whole to bring this to fruition. So it's a very interesting learning scenario for me over the last 5 to 8 years, from a perspective of standing back and looking at this happening, to one that I'm more involved with and understanding how it all comes together. But what I've gotten to realize is that it's very, very important for the performance of the company to ensure that we have a steady flow of qualified leads coming into the organization. And the only way that's going to happen is through a concerted marketing effort.
Yeah, I would concur to that. So let's look at the future. Obviously going into I hate the terminology post-COVID or the new normal, but what does the future of technology look like, Steve? Maybe I'll flip that one over to you first. Where do you see, if you had to fast forward 5 years, where do you think Forthright's going to be, and what kind of role do you guys continue to play?
That's a really good question, because over the almost 30 years, we have evolved and changed the company easily 12 to 15 times. We actually, one of our annual meetings, we did this whole video to show how many different types of businesses and technology focuses that we were delivering to clients over like a 12 or 13 year period. so they can understand the evolution. So it's really tough to say. Obviously, mobility is big. I think that the focus on a Windows desktop and even caring about what the desktop is from an IT perspective is going to start to fade away, because we're going to leverage more and more SaaS apps and mobile apps. And instead of everything being in a data center, now it's kind of all over the place. So the way you think, instead of trying to build like a moat around your castle, everything now has to change. And I don't know that concept is going to change over the next 5 years. I think we're going to now more and more, adopt that. And within 5 years from now, that's going to be the norm, basically, if it's not already halfway there today. And that brings a lot of challenges, because it means that customers, they've got decades of experience protecting their data, protecting their assets, delivering different applications. And the truth is, all of that is changing. And not only because the companies are driving it, but then you have all the shadow IT, you have organizations, the decisions happening at a different level. HR and line of business managers are actually making decisions, no longer IT groups. Their job is to try to execute. The line of business saying, listen, you know what, you guys take too long, and I'm going to go do this, and whatever that is. And obviously, leveraging all the SaaS apps and various cloud services means that they can execute at a much faster pace. With that being said, security, compliance, governance, all of that is still an issue. It has to be addressed, and it's often overlooked by the line of business because it's not really part of their desired outcome, right? They're trying to drive new revenues, and that's their focus. So I think our company is going to continue to help organizations try to navigate all of these challenges, and we've started shifting a lot of our services over the last year and a half down this route. Now, people started going down cloud way before we did. We were delayed in that, partially one, because you don't want to be too early. And second of all, I think that there is the technical assistance that you need to leverage cloud services. But I think where we're driving additional strength is not just that, well, we can help you flip the switches and get it all working, is that we can help you make really prudent business decisions and policy decisions, because we're going to explain to you what the ramifications are of some of these options, versus let's just go and do it, and I'm going to drive your desired outcome, and the consequences, and often unintended consequences, well, nobody talks about, because they want to sell you on it. And for us, that's really important, that you understand the commitment that you're doing, you understand the ramifications, you understand down the road some other things that now you have to consider, and that advisory type of service, kicks in. You've seen some of the marketing come your way as we start building out 3 different paths for companies. And essentially, I can provide the company or client, listen, here is your triage. Oh shit, I need help, and I need good technical resources. And we've got that. And it's a good entry point to gain experience with us. Then you have businesses that say, look, I want to run everything myself, but I need guidance. So I need advisory services. I need strategic planning. I want to do technology road mapping and POCs, and I want to try these things out, but I don't want to do it with the boys and toys concept. I want to see, how do I connect business drivers and outcomes to this technology? And then finally, look, I want to focus on my business. I want to give you the desired outcomes, and I don't care how you do it. You're going to own it all. And you have these 3 different pathways, but it is all focused around driving and leveraging these new technologies. And I see that continuing and increasing over the next 5 years. That's
Stuart, I got to tell you from a strategic perspective, I know you mentioned that Steve mentioned when we first met in February that we'd be working from home, and that it was a very interesting prediction. I don't take any credit for the ability to see into the future. There's been visionaries in the IT field that have this uncanny ability to predict trends and things that are occurring into the future. But what I do see is that this pandemic has really altered the state of the industry. Now, what Steve just mentioned, obviously these to coin a phrase from the Constitution, these truths are self-evident, right? I mean, these patterns are obviously going to be occurring from an IT perspective. But what I think has occurred is a very seismic shift in the companies that are going to survive this pandemic and the characteristics that they have, and how that's going to affect Forthright is yet to be determined in terms of how Forthright handles these things. Now, the organization has been very, very adept, like what Steve mentioned, in terms of being able to reinvent itself over time to address whatever seismic shifts have occurred. And I think what's central to the organization is not so much what technologies we represent, how we go about developing this or deploying these services or delivering these services. I think what has driven success to the organization for the past 27 years and will continue driving success into the future is really contained, what Steve also mentioned earlier, is in the culture of the organization. If you look at the 4 pillars that we drive home to not only our employees but our customers, I think these things is what drives the organization to ensure that we're working for the best interest of our customers and providing value to them in whatever fashion it comes at that time. So what does the future hold in terms of this? I don't know, but I think we've done a really good job of creating an organization that can adapt and provide that for our customers and maintaining not only our integrity, but the fiduciary responsibility towards them. And I think when you take those 4 different concepts joining together, it really is what drives success to Forthright. It really is what drives the special sauce to the organization. And in a nutshell, that is the reason why customers continue patronizing Forthright and being long-term, decades-long type of customers for the organization.
Sounds great. So we have like 2 minutes left. I'm going to give the last question to Andrew because I think it's warranted for him. Andrew, if you rewound the clock 30 years and had to say to a younger, younger Andrew Medina, or what would what 3 recommendations would you give to that young Andrew?
That is so funny. I'm asked this question many times when I go to the local university and I work with their entrepreneurship department. And I think everything would be completely different if we started 27 years ago, Steve, with a business plan and saying, this is what we want to accomplish. Because like I mentioned before, it started as a joke almost, this thing that we called, the organization back then. So one of the most definite things is to understand where it is you want to go and plan on how to get there. Obviously, as time has progressed, now we are much, much more focused with plans and where do we want to be in a certain amount of time. But even that strategic thinking is a very hard thing to do. I think companies really need to devote themselves more to the strategic effort of where it is that they're going and be able to deliver that message to their employees, because that's what kind of gets everybody rolling in the same thing. So I think those are 2 things, Stuart. Start with that business plan, where it is you want to go, and strategically develop it and let your employees know where it is you're going, what it is you're doing, what's the path forward, convince them on it, get them behind it, because I think that is really what spells a significant level of success. I believe that the organization, if we would have done that 27 years ago, would be in a much, much different place today. Not that I say that I don't like where we're at right now. I think it's been a great ride and I love my business partners. I just believe that we probably would be further along.
Steve, 30 seconds.
I'd love to add something. I think that when you're at your busiest and you feel you're at your most successfulness, that is the time you need to be innovating and changing, not when things are slow or when you see the downturn. What happens, you get very comfortable. And I think that would be the message I would give myself 30 years ago. When you get comfortable, pull yourself out of that and start innovating. Don't waste a moment's time because you've hit some goal or some plateau and then ride it. No. That's the time you have to continue to innovate, especially in our industry and technology. Wonderful.
Good advice. Team, it's been great having you on. Kristin, Andrew, Frank, and Steve from Forthright. Check them out at forthright.com. Thanks, everyone, for tuning into this week's edition of the MSP Show on Blog Talk Radio. Check us out future editions as we carry on this fun podcast that we're doing. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us.